Um, Welcome everyone. I am Jay, aka Dark Matter. Nice to meet you all, and it's a beautiful Sunday evening here. So let's jump right in. Got a lot to get to. The markets are about to open as well. So let's jump in. So today, this is my first time doing the stream, so we'll learn from it. It'll be my first time. We'll get some feedback. You can make some comments in the live chat there, obviously. And most importantly, we are here to learn. So if you have any questions, tag along, share along, comment as well. And most importantly, don't forget to like and subscribe. And for those of you who are new or have not used Fallen, don't forget, we do have a promo code for you, Dark Matter 10. You can enter that at vol.land, and that will get you 10% off your first month. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump right in. So, uh, for those of you who are not familiar to the Volin platform, let's just jump right in here. So Volin essentially provides us, unlike option flows from customers and things of that nature, it provides us more with dealer positioning. So essentially from a dealer positioning, we are talking about, where we really want to see what moves the markets essentially, right? Customers, they hedge. There's a lot of reasons why they take the trades that they do. So if you go to one of those option flows, you don't know why a level is important. It just might be important to that customer who's taking that trade because they might be hedging or whatever the case might be. So without further ado there, let's go ahead and jump into the volume data. So I'm going to kind of bounce around here between, sharing essentially the volume screen here. I'm going to jump into some charts as well, and then we'll kind of go there from that standpoint. So first and foremost, I want to talk a little bit about my Volun workspace. So the way that this is crafted and set up is I have obviously my all expiration Vanna. Vanna is my most important Greek. So I will rely on it thoroughly and throughout my trading. I am more of a kind of, if I see a swing opportunity, which over the past few weeks we've not had that opportunity, I will obviously take a swing when one shows itself. When it doesn't, and when I'm wanting to take a little bit more risk in one, then I will do either kind of like a weekly trade, a couple days out, or I will essentially, day trade. I'll come in. I might come in for 10, 15 minutes, depending on how fast the trade plays out. So there are a few different ways here that you can play, and based on how I will lay out the workspace, how I've laid that out here, fine tunes basically for my trading style. So the all expiration Vanna, obviously, my call out there is you kind of zoom out. This is the swing opportunities, right? You get into one of these like big Vanna levels here. Those are swing opportunities, right? You hit, like a 60-20, like, yeah, that might be a short opportunity if this is the big brick, wall that it is when we hit it. Or, if we ever hit 5,500 again, you'd want to trade this if it stays that way. Now, the market is dynamic, obviously. This is where the existing key positions are and the levels. These could trade over, change over time. So that is why I have the all expiration view to kind of see what are those big levels like. The past couple of weeks, 56.55 was a key critical level. Last week, 56.75 was a big level, right? So you can kind of see as we grow, the red here is essentially your quote unquote support and resistance. But as we all know, if volatility increases both in the market and in the IV on the ticker, we can rip right through those reds, right? And similarly, the greens there, those are magnets, right? What we are chasing, essentially. So when we start to look at this, you would, look from an all expiration, you're like, oh, coast is clear until we get to 5,800. And while, yes, maybe from a swing, if you started entering back here at 56.50 or you accumulated last week at 56.75, of course, that is the view. But if the trading session opens here in 5 minutes or tomorrow, are you going to immediately just enter in for a long? Probably not. And that's where we have to dig in and see where our entry levels are at. So we can obviously look at this like 5740 clearly shows, but it's minor in support, right? There's not a lot of gamma. Look at it; it's about what 87-ish million sitting in sorry, not gamma, but Vanna. So we don't have a lot there, right? So we have a cluster here, but again, what I start to look at here is now what does this look like from a weekly standpoint, right? I'm looking at this from a weekly view. That's my kind of trading style in terms of like going week to week to week, right? So you can clearly see there's a little bit of chaos, a little bit of uncertainty, right? We have a resistance above spot, we have support below spot. So first and foremost, what this tells me is I'm not going to enter a trade until I start to see some clarity, right? So if I was trading Monday, let's say, I would want to see, for example, do we trade here to the 5730, even futures action, right? If I'm going to go and be, if I'm going to be trading futures, one of the first area of supports here I'm going to look at and keenly have an alert set fixated is going to be this 5730 level, right? So that's an area of opportunity for bears or bulls, excuse me, to hold this, which then shows me that okay, 5740 is another support. While not major, it is medium. It doesn't mean we have to go here. We could have buyers who are attracted and who could push price from here, right? Now, clearly, we have resistance here. 5760 glaringly is showing. So I wouldn't be shocked, for example, in futures if we started to go up, we hit this resisted, and then we started go back, because remember, as we go up levels we flip these, essentially is how you need to look at them, from red to green, right? So they become magnets. So think of like a ping pong action. So you hit it and then you bounce it back, right, until you find that area of support. So that is one example for what I'm looking at tonight here. Once futures action opens up, we're T minus about a minute and a half here. Those are the types of things that I'm essentially looking for immediately on the week to start out. Now, to further, refine this and look at what I'm looking for, I want to then look at like the daily. So this is my zero DTE on Vanna. If you don't have your zero DTE on Vanna, I would highly recommend it, especially if you're intraday trading. It just helps you with a few additional data points and things of that nature. And you can see here, there's, 5740 is another area. And for tomorrow, we've got about 43 million in Vanna here. So that's important to me and what I see there, right? Uh, if we look at from a resistance standpoint, 5765 stand out. We got 5775 and we have 5790 as well, right? And then clearly from a support, 5740, 5730, 5715, and then you got 5710. You have these magnets. The magnets can also act what I can, consider them to be as pivots. So yes, we could, get through 5765, but we could hit 5770. And to me, at that point in time, that becomes the pivot, right? I want to know now if the market is going to essentially flip this from, call it resistance to then support. So two things that I'm looking for, right? Do we hit this and then sell off and then maybe use 5760, 5770 here as potential support, right? So those are the types of things that I am essentially looking for immediately as we jump in. So the market has opened. Let's just quickly check in. I'll come back into Vanna here. So we have opened, and what are we at? We're up about a point so far. So we'll come back. Essentially, what I want to get into now is the volume profile, right? I think the volume profile is extremely important to a lot of what I do with Volin, and then kind of coupling and marrying it with data. The first thing that I just want to highlight and showcase for you here is, let me just turn to the SPX chart. So I'll essentially chart the SPX gets a little bit more messier because I play around with it. But what I want to essentially share with you here from an SPX standpoint are, very basic things like if you look at it here, we had a gap in our volume in our profile last week. So this created essentially between 5683 and 5665. It created what is in the volume profile world a low volume node, right? So while it is going to act as a magnet, it can also act as support or resistance depending on where you're at, right? And that was a reason for me not acting very bearish. First of all, I want to see price below that low volume node. That's the first thing. And if you notice, a lot of our trades, when it hit this level here, 5680, 5675 last week, we killed it, right? We killed our trades and said, okay, we'll let it be. If you don't, trust in the calls, then let it, float up essentially and sell on the way up. So that was essentially a little bit of, last week. What I did is let it, float up, sell the rips back down, right? So that was my trade plan and analysis was to do that. Now, when we found kind of that final support, that end of day push, we pushed here, and then we had the next day up as well. You can clearly now say, all right, is a low volume node and it's acting as support. So for this given week, again, I don't use SPX. I just wanted to clearly show it to you. You can kind of see those gaps or those low volume nodes a little bit better with the SPX. That is why I will essentially trade or chart both of them at the same time. So without further ado, so we're about 50 points, difference between SPX and ES. If I go back here, what did we say? 5760. So 5800. We're at what now? 5760 essentially. We are at the SPX or 5775, 5755, excuse me. We're roughly at with the SPX. So if you look at that, we are at the first area of support resistance there. So does it hold? Does it go down? Those are types of things that I'm now looking for in the futures actions. One thing with futures actions, I'll just tell you, it is a little bit more random because we're more illiquid, right? There's not as much liquidity overnight. So you will see over, a couple of times, like last week, we get over a key level, but it's a complete failed breakout, right? It pushed and then it just comes right back down and it, kind of does its chopping overnight and then, does whatever it does in the morning time. So I will just put that out there. While levels are levels, respect them. But in futures action, when one sells and you're expecting it to keep going up, there's a high chance that it can keep, coming down and seek that next level. So there's just a little bit more liquidity in the market at that point in time. So this week here from volume profile, immediately the big level 5780s took about 50 points. That puts you at about 5730 from an SPX standpoint. Our previous close was also right at 5800. If you notice here, we opened action, tested that 5800, held it. So you can, at least in overnight futures action, that is a key level here, whether we hold that or not. So about 5750 on the SPX. So that's one thing. I'm just kind of looking at my notes here to see if I'm covering everything that I wanted to cover today. So give me one moment. Okay, let's now jump back into the volume profile. So I will look at it. I will look at it from a 4-hour time frame. If you're in trading view, essentially you can come in here. It's the periodic volume profile, and I have it set up for different times. I will put a link both in my Discord and, or not the Vol Discord, but my Twitter profile as well. Captain Wick, one of my partners, he goes through on shows you how to set these up. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but you can see here, futures action. We're pushing. It's about 57, 56 SPX right now. The first area of resistance will be right here is where we're going to be looking at. So 57.65. So let's see what it does once we come into those levels. So weekly profile, I look at it from a 4 hour. You can also hop into the daily. I think the daily is important. What I'll look at from that is like a monthly profile. So let me turn off my. So what you'll see here, this is our monthly profile, right? So this is September's value area high. This is our previous monthly close in September. So we're actually trading below it. So 58.14 is very critical for us to overtake it, for the bulls, and 48.30. And then if you also notice here, our point of control in September was 57.87. I've also marked that low volume node here, and I have to update the range, but it's essentially just right in this area here. So that same SPX low volume node, I'll mark it here on ES as well. So without further ado, let me go back into Volin here. So on a weekly overview, just to call out, I know we're a little bit on time here, but I want to kind of kick in. So from a weekly level, I'm patient, right? When I'm looking at a weekly level, I'm patient and I want to see what one of the key levels trades. That right now is 57.30 from, below spot. If we see a sell and it comes into 57.30, I'm a buyer, especially if the data does not change, does not permutate, or shows that more selling is coming. I am a buyer here. Hell, I'm just a buyer in this range between 57.40 and 57.30. I might not get there, but let's see. The other thing now, if I am long, especially if you are in futures action, just check in where we're at. So let me just go over to the 15-minute chart here to, we're almost at we actually have two 5-minute candles. So you can see here, from an opening range, we have broken it. I would not be shocked that this starts to continue as long as we're now above that 5,800 level. We should go to that 58.10, 58.15 here, which gets us to that 57.60, 65 level. And you see here now how the Vanna 57.65 overlays kind of with the previous monthly close. So you kind of overlay these levels to say, why are they important? One reason is there's a Vanna near it. Another reason is our previous monthly close, right? Are we bullish above a monthly close or are we bearish? Obviously bullish, right? So these are the types of things and the analysis that you have to kind of combine with these two to ensure that you're, making the right trades and the trading strategy that you have accurately. So let's go back. So 57.60 is an area that I'm wanting to see what price does. It doesn't mean I'm going to immediately jump in and take a trade there. I actually want to say if I was bullish, right, I want to see price hit 57.60 and then I want to see how it reacts. Do we find a retracement, right? And is that retracement back to 57.50 and we hold that? That's when I kind of look into what I call it failed breakouts and failed breakdowns, right? And if you're unaware, let's just quickly do uh, it'll break down. I'll show you the fill breakdown view of this, but we can look at Investopedia has this. So what is a failed break? And then I'll kind of, discuss on the charts here how those look, right? So a failed breakout is essentially we have a level. So let's say in this charts example here of Alphabet, right, before its stock split, it had a key level of 1280, right? So like me, let's just assume that that was 57.60 from an XPX. So I want to see what price does as it hits that 57.60, and then I want to see how it reacts. Now, if I'm intraday trading, I'm essentially now looking at a couple of key time frames. First and foremost, if I'm in if I'm in overnight action, the 15 and 30 is like minimum what I'm looking at. And if the trade's left me, it's left me. But because of the illiquidity that's going on in the market overnight, I'm just not here to take that risk. I'd rather take trades that I have a little bit more conviction. So again, I would even say the 10-minute overnight actually works pretty dang well. That's a good one. Now, when the session opens, I'm now starting to look at the 5 and 10 minute candles, right? Those are the most important to me. And then I will flip over to a 3 minute candle for entry. And essentially, I'm looking at this moving average, right? If I'm bullish, I want to, have price hit this, especially if we're right at a key level. That 3 minute chart essentially becomes my entry. I am looking for the best entry here on essentially what is this? I'll just show it to you here. That is from an SMA. That's our 5 SMA. That is that orange there. So I want to look at on a 3 and a 5. Do we hold that? That's my entry then per my trade, especially if we're at a key Vanna level near that for entry. I can use that for conviction basically. So that is one way. Uh, so going back, the fill breakout hits a level, and then a candle close, maybe one candle, especially if we're in a low volume kind of trading scenario, you might want to give it two candles, especially on a 5, wait for that 10 or that 15 sometimes. And then if we close below it like this is a failed breakout. That means if I go back to my 5760, we hit it, we're most likely going to now bounce back. Now, how much we bounce back? Well, the market's dynamic. We got to see what volume shows us. But immediately, one area here I'm looking at is 5750, right? That's the first. And then if that slices through, it's going to go to 5740. And then if that slices through, it goes to 5730. So you kind of just work your way down, kind of domino effect style, essentially. Uh, all right. So for the week, just to recap again, I'm looking, obviously, we hit 5730. I'm interested as a buyer, especially if the data does not change and we continue to see all of this put support continue to exist in the market. If it starts to fade, obviously, then look out, watch out. But as a bear, I cannot be a bear, as I said, until I see this low volume node break. Can I scalp and take some puts along the way? Sure, I can do that. Can I take some calls? Yes, of course I can do that. Nothing from a swing interests me still. I am not interested in, not knowing whether I hit 10 points and then those 10 points occur overnight and then we sell off another 20 points and then come to support by the time the market opens. I'd rather take my chances day trading instead. So again, 5730 is a key area of support, resistance 5760 here. Magnet, we break 5760, we're gonna go chase 5775. This then becomes my weekly pivot. If we can take out this level, we will go chase more than likely 5815. So that is my outcome with speed bumps, obviously, kind of at 5780. These magnets here as well will become pivots, right? So pivots are resistance until they pivot, right, and hold as support. So that is it. I will get the full trade plan in Volin. I'm still writing it up and kind of sharing some data there and some interesting information. So that will still come in Volin. I hope this was helpful. Provided you some information here today. Again, the other thing, I guess, before I leave, there's two topics, I guess. Well, let's just, continue to do that. As I look at my weekly or even my daily levels, I will then overlap and say what are common with the all expiration, right? Do we have positive band at those levels like the weekly? So I kind of look at that overlay. The more overlay, the stronger that level is. The other thing I want to kind of get into is the cumulative exposure. This as a day trader to me has like changed, especially a little bit of how Captain and I have been dissecting this. So I want to go quickly into our Discord here last week, into our weekly plan, and pull up our chart here. So give me 1 second. Okay. All right. So essentially, I will treat let's just kind of look at this cumulative exposure. I think it's important. I'll essentially treat this, the cumulative exposure into these four buckets here. There's four quadrants essentially. So you'll hear me or see me type in the Volin Discord. Essentially, we're in a buy quad, or we're in a buy sell quad, right? Or we're in a sell sell set of quads, right? And essentially, how you want to look at that is you look at this, right? So if you look here, where essentially the buy to buy is we've got support here essentially. This looks like 56.50, 56.45 here, and that's our support, right? Like we're gonna find buyers, at those levels and below, right? And then they're gonna push price, and in as long as whatever levels, and here it was 56.90, and you could even go up a little bit. It looks like 5700, right? These are in our buy quadrant. So as long as we hold that support, we push up, right? And then we start to find sellers at these levels. And then same thing, if we this is, if we start to look at this, if you see something like this is extremely bullish. It means a move is coming. You look for, and I'll show you how you go back into this. But what you want to do is, as you start to see something like this shape up, this is extremely bullish, right? The left end tail of the Vanna is in a buy quad. The right end tail is in a buy quad as well, right? So now you're like, okay, where do I find support? Where does it go? So that's where you look at your Vanna chart, right? And this is the exact Vanna chart from that. But essentially, I'm going to look at the same things here that I was showing you earlier. What are the big red bars? What are the big magnets, right? Those are at specific levels, not at a region or section of it. So those are the types of things that I am looking for as well. So let's now go back here and look at tomorrow's, and this is more of a zero DTE thing. I know you can look at this more from an all expiration, but from an intraday, like this is where I find these pivots when we might go from a buy to a sell. And then even last week, I think it was Friday, right? We were in a buy sell kind of quad, but we had this like random sells, 10 points latter half of the day, right? And instead of getting bearish, I actually got like, bullish. I saw that price was coming into an area here in the buy quadrant, added a couple options. When we're in the latter half of the day, I don't go as strong as I do in the early parts of the day. And then, took it to basically about here where price was at and sold before we got into the sell quadrant. So let's review this, for example. So today, this zero DT is kind of showing you what I showed you with the banners, right? That if we can get price above 57.55 here, so that's roughly what 58.05 on ES, we're in a buy essentially up until we get to 57.80. And from 57 to 80 to 57.85, that's where we start to see our sellers, right? And now if we clear 57.85 and we get above into 57.90, we're again gonna go push. We're in a buy quadrant, right? And then same thing here is if we break 57.45, we're gonna find ourselves selling down. And you kind of saw, the levels below support. And one thing that what this shows me, why I even said I would wait and be a little bit more patient for today and let the data update, is look at this. Like we're just kind of bouncing. There isn't a nice like tail that kind of goes in the buy quadrant like I showed you. There isn't even a nice tail that goes from buy to sell, like a V shape, right? This is just showing you kind of up and down, right? So there is going to be, even as we clear 57.60, for example, it's not smooth sailing, right? It's going to be a little bit of choppiness, a little bit of back and forth. So this is the other thing I use for cumulative exposure as well, as to highlight where we might start to see some choppiness, where that choppiness is going to occur. And that's when you start to see this line kind of go up and down all over the place. So once again, let me just recap that for you. So we treat the cumulative exposure, and you use the y-axis here is the spot price. The x-axis here is essentially the $0, zero Vanna, and then The top left corner is the pie quad, the bottom right corner is the buy. You see visually what it is. The sell is in the top right, and the sell is in the bottom left. And then I will essentially look at that more from a zero DTE. You can look at it from a weekly level. I haven't, picked up, I would say, too much from this yet, except for kind of key critical levels on the weekly, right? So what this is saying, you can see here, from a weekly level, essentially you start to break that 5750, you're going to have a little bit of selling. You get into like a selling quad here. So you got to go look at your data. Now this will change just like any other data does as we clear levels. So again, right now I'm looking at how to treat this from a weekly level. Obviously, if we look at this from an all exposure, all expiration, how you treat this is essentially you look at this as we write anything at the $0, that means we're at balance essentially, right? If we get up to 5,700 here, we're out of balance. We're going to find buyers, right? All the way to 56.55. Now that breaks, we're in a selling zone, right? And that selling zone can go all the way to 55.45 ish here. So that's how you can kind of look at this from a swing standpoint, right? Is if we break these key levels and if the chart continues to act the way that it does, these are the levels now to swing, right? You use this as support 5700 to 5655, but we break 5655, that's when we're going to get selling, and that selling is going to rip down up until 5550-ish, call it, right? So that's how you can use it as well from an all expiration view. And you notice here, while we have a little bit of support or push up to 5800, like it's going to take a lot, like something has to change in this chart to get past 5800 at this point in time. All right. That's the end of it. I hope this was extremely helpful today. Let me take a look at some of the comments here. Uh, let's see what some of the questions were. The intro music is dope. Thank you, James. Love the music as well. Hey, Eric, nice to see you here as well. I noticed your homepage is primarily individual strike charts. Any reason why use them over the cumulative charts? Uh, well, I do, like if, for example, gamma here, I look at gamma mainly from an all expiration. I don't look at it from a specific expiration. I will look at it because this is the dealer's book you're looking at, right? Again, for someone who's looking at this, the gamma here, the big green bars are your resistance or your supports above and below spot, right? So a huge area of interest for the dealers are going to be 5,800, 5,650, and even 5,500. In between there and even 5,775 is just noise, right, to the dealers. These are the levels where they're going to have the most reaction. So even as a swing trader, these are the levels where you might want to patiently wait to see what the rest of the Greeks look like, the Vanna. More than likely the thesis here, depending on what the new Vanna looks like, is that we'll use 5775 as resistance. Now, Vanna will trump Gamma. Dealers can have an imbalance book. They can keep it in balance for as long as they wish, right? And then that's when you get what we call an angry dealer who wants to balance their book and get it back into order. So these are things I keep in mind. Obviously, I hope, James, that answered your question, but if not, reach out, let me know. All right. I think that's it. I hope that was extremely informative today. Please like, comment, subscribe, share. If there's anything else you want to cover, maybe I'll start to do this on a weekly basis, and off we go. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of your evening.